Bonjour, bonjour everyone. Don't worry, we're going to speak in English. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with French, but let's do this in English. Hi Yvonne, I'm thrilled to have you here in Paris. It's a great pleasure, and to talk about a subject that is really relevant right now, of course, all over the world. As a quick introduction, you mentioned to me that you grew up in the US. By the border of Mexico, of course, that drew some attention to you about the subject of migration. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get involved in the first place?
Hi everyone, my name is Hester. I'm on the community partnerships team at Facebook. I did grow up on the US-Mexico border in El Paso, Texas, which was a really formative experience for me, exposing me from a very early age to issues of border crossing and migration and the narratives surrounding borders, all of which motivated me to want to study international relations and international development. And so, a lot of what we're hearing and researching and grappling with in terms of the modern humanitarian context was pretty familiar to me from an early age. Fast forward several years, in 2006, I started working with a small NGO, an amazing NGO called FORGE, which is an acronym that stands for Facilitating Opportunities for Refugee Growth and Empowerment. And FORGE was a UNHCR partner in Zambia. And it was a really special model, which was very important. That was definitely an inflection point in my personal and professional trajectory. FORGE's theory of change was that by harnessing and tapping into the capacity and skills of refugee populations while they were in camps or settlements in Zambia, we could make an investment in their future and attempt to break the cycle of war and poverty throughout Africa. And so our programming focused on community-created, community-led development projects. It was a very participatory, collaborative, bottom-up model, which at the time in 2006 was even rarer than it is today. And we lived and worked and volunteered alongside these refugee communities. I made several trips to Maheba refugee settlement, which is in the northwestern province of Zambia. It is a very protracted refugee situation. The camp had been open at that point for probably 30 plus years. And the population was a mix of Angolan, Congolese, Rwandan, Sudanese, and a handful of other nationalities. And so that experience left me with an appreciation for a very particular approach to development projects, and I mean community and social and economic development, not tech development. And that's kind of been my approach since then. And it also left me with a deep sense of empathy and solidarity for refugees and for the refugee and humanitarian context. And so I carry that with me today.
Great, and I'm sure you're carrying that today at Facebook. You're in charge of the community, as you mentioned. It's a really recent department within Facebook. Can you tell us a little bit more the way it works?
Sure. As we all know, it's been a really intense, exciting last 1 to 2 years. In the United States, a lot has been shifting. These shifts were felt within the company of Facebook. There was a big internal announcement in about earlier this year, Q1 of this year, where the company changed its mission to put an explicit focus on community building into the company mission, which had sort of it had always been kind of underlying our work, but there's really been a conscious effort to heighten that. And so the new mission is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together, which I think we all know is kind of necessary and the result of a lot of the geopolitical events that we've already been talking about today. So within our broader partnerships organization, there's a new team called Community Partnerships. And if you can think about, many of you are probably familiar with the importance and the kind of attention that is placed on advertisers on Facebook or publishers or media partners that use the Facebook platform. One of our team's mandates is to identify community leaders, invest in community leadership, and make those community leaders also kind of VIP partners to the company, which for me, with a background in social impact and international development work, is tremendously exciting. So we look a lot at the data surrounding communities on Facebook, use of Facebook groups, and we're just seeing tremendously powerful, inspirational outcomes and stories, sometimes happening in the online community itself, sometimes as a result of the linkages between the online community members and their real-world efforts, which involve everything from advocacy, collective action, local community service, lots of fundraising flows, lots of donations. So it's really powerful stuff, and what we're trying to do is understand that, help the rest of our company, all our product teams, understand what more they can be building and developing from a software development perspective to support community leaders and the communities and the work that they're trying to do.
And so does it fall into the needs of the refugees right now? Do you have any specific examples so far?
It's a great question. So our team is kind of organized. We're looking across a range of spaces and verticals. One of my focus areas is actually health communities and support communities. And we also have nonprofit and social impact areas of focus. So yes, we're working with a lot of nonprofits and NGOs. I'm really excited that TECHFUGEES is also a partner of ours, and we're just so, again, this is such an exemplary group and community that has taken shape very quickly and quite effectively has bridged online forums with real-world action and outcomes, which is just amazing. And my hope is that, clearly, I'm very motivated to do more with refugees and with humanitarian organizations and with innovators like the TECHFUGEES community. And
you were mentioning an example like in Greece, for example, the Facebook page, they really took off and was really helpful for the people who went through this country. Or can you detail us a little bit?
Definitely. I'd say creative and effective uses of Facebook to support refugees or humanitarian actors goes back several years. Definitely predates the formal formation of my team. It even predates me joining the company, which was almost 3 years ago. But yes, there are so many examples of amazing use of Facebook pages, in some cases created by refugees, in other cases created by UNHCR or their implementing and operating partners to do things like provide localized content for refugees, which is really, really hard in certain parts of the world, to provide accurate, high quality, reliable information about resources and local services that refugees can access. Those are some examples of pages, Facebook pages, that have been at least on our radar for a little while. There's also been what I consider to be really effective partnerships between the Facebook Internet.org team that has a product called Free Basics that allows mobile operators to provide access to selected websites and services at no cost, no subscription or balance needed for people on their networks. So that's a huge step forward in terms of access for some of these under-connected populations. And some of the Free Basics partnerships that I've been really excited about include Refugee, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It provides kind of a fresh iteration on contact tracing and reunification, which is really, really compelling. I read earlier this year that they've successfully facilitated over 6,000 contacts, which is so powerful when I've heard so many stories about families who just don't actually know the status or the location of their members. So Refugee has been a really great example. And there's another partner, I think it's called Info Migrant, maybe it's French. I don't speak French, I'm sorry, I would like to learn. But they also provide very accurate, timely, reliable information for refugees and migrants. So those are really powerful, unprecedented examples of what can come from these sorts of partnerships between developers and tech companies and kind of allies and advocates on behalf of refugees.
And how does it translate to your team, to your work into your team? How do you really help to develop those communities? Do you have any specific tools or anything designed for it?
Let me tell you a little bit about our kind of conceptual approach. We're very motivated by the work of people like Bob Putnam, who's an American author who writes a lot about social capital and the declines in membership in traditional community institutions and the way that that is changing our individual lives, leaving people feeling more isolated, less connected, et cetera. And so we're very interested in how online tools, online communities can help reverse that trend of decline and can galvanize and rejuvenate membership in community institutions within the current context of social media and online tools that sometimes replace offline communities and in other cases complement them. So we look at both online communities and offline communities. We start with a focus on the leaders of those communities. In a lot of cases, these are accidental leaders. They have somehow brought together a group of people around a similar interest or a common passion. And that has given rise to a large and growing community, which often has surprised these leaders. So one of the kind of offerings that we have is like holistic leadership training and leadership development work. In some cases, that has to do with specific online tools, with Facebook groups, with Facebook pages. A little bit of education there goes a long way in terms of the efficiency and the impact of those individual leaders. And we're also studying, what are the real-world outcomes that are happening because of these groups or alongside these groups? How can we quantify, the restoration of social capital, the building of social capital? What are the different forms that can take across different verticals and across different parts of the world? So a lot of it is just partnering with and listening to these really amazing community leaders and understanding how tech and social media fit into and support their broader objectives.
That brings up the subject of connectivity, which is also, that was also one of your subjects when you joined Facebook. You were part of the Wi-Fi program. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit more about this program too?
I'd love to. I also just want to say how excited I was by the previous panel. There aren't a lot of people who can talk about connectivity in Kakuma and Nyarugusu, and so I'm very excited to geek out with those people later. Yeah, when I joined Facebook, I was part of a then stealth team, a total startup within the company called the Express Wi-Fi by Internet.org team. It's a connectivity project looking at barriers related to infrastructure and affordability. We formed partnerships with telcos in various markets to build Wi-Fi networks with a sustainable business model that involved local entrepreneurs operating the Wi-Fi hotspots. So it was really an attempt to galvanize telco industries to kind of take a little more risk, expand coverage into areas that they are not currently operating in, and also spread a kind of sustainable business model for connectivity to unconnected or underconnected parts of the world. So tremendously exciting work, and the program continues and it's doing very well. During that time, my time on that team, we formed a partnership, started a conversation with a great team within UNHCR called the Connectivity for Refugees Initiative that is doing something so groundbreaking, and I say that semi-ironically. They're advocating for kind of widespread acceptance or commitment to providing connectivity not only for emergency responders or NGO staff, but for the refugees themselves and the people living in and around these camps and settlements. So sounds very basic and long overdue, but is actually not, is still not the kind of prevailing mindset, at least among some parts of the humanitarian space. We did a lot of research with them, talked a lot to local partners, local UNHCR staff, local telcos, to try to explore what were the opportunities, both near-term and long-term, to expand connectivity access in and around both camps and settlements and urban centers where refugees are currently located. That's a very challenging project area, let me tell you. There are lots of reasons why that has moved more slowly than I personally would have liked. But two great things came out of those conversations and a kind of adjacent partnership with NetHope, which is a really wonderful organization. We were able to partner together with a kind of a small group of people to set up Wi-Fi hotspots in the Greek islands and also in some parts of Jordan, not in the camps themselves, but again in urban centers where there is a cluster of NGOs providing services to refugees as well as refugees living. So that's really exciting. I do think those were really important steps forward, both for Facebook's connectivity work and just the way that we think about opportunities for connectivity for refugees.
And did you see any improvement since you entered that field?
Well, I do think, Facebook has lots of different perceptions. People have opinions about Facebook, but I'll certainly say that, when Facebook asks for a meeting or sort of organizes a conversation, people do listen at least once. They'll come to the table. And so that has been very promising. I think more and more of the telco partners are both aware of the fact that connectivity is a huge priority area, not just for Facebook, but for lots of companies and increasingly humanitarian NGOs, UNHCR, somewhat. And I do think people are, they're more willing to even consider refugees as not just this kind of separate, isolated, irrelevant population, which I do think, unfortunately, is a mindset in some parts of the world and in some markets. But they see that there is economic potential there, and so we use a very simple formula to kind of assess whether projects will be good. We discuss whether or not they'll be good for our partners or our users, the people using products. We discuss whether it will be good for Facebook and whether it will be good for the world. And so I do think rural connectivity, expanding coverage areas, and considering refugees as available populations within that paradigm is happening and is forward motion. So.
And you mentioned the image of refugees that needs to change, and you do have a program or Counterspeech project, which it aims to help to change that mentality and to change that perspective.
Yeah.
How have you gone so far?
Yeah, I really empathize with Hassan earlier, who was talking just about the wild misperceptions and kind of unbased, unsubstantiated opinions about refugees and claims towards refugees, and the extent to which refugees are not entirely in control of the narratives about them. And that was another one of my big takeaways from my earlier work with Forge in Zambia, and it's hard. And so I do think that we all as individuals, we all as part of our organizations and companies have an opportunity to address that in little ways and big ways. And so back to the professional context, there have been a lot of concerted partnerships and initiatives in the last 2 years around countering hate speech and extremism in online forums. So Facebook has been a partner with some other think and do tanks and research firms, just first understanding what are the patterns and types of hate speech and extremism that are really prevalent. And a lot of this, of course, has been surfacing in conjunction with the patterns of migration throughout Europe. And so after the research and kind of understand work was done, then there was a creation of an online civil courage initiative that is both, it's a set of resources online and a Facebook page and a set of real-world programs that are meant to empower NGOs and media partners to recognize hate speech and extremism and to feel equipped in terms of how to respond, what action do they take, or when do they refrain from taking action, and what are the sort of balancing pieces of content that can be put forth in these online discussions to offer a counter narrative which would discredit or debunk the more hateful or extremist perspective that's been shared. And so I think that those sorts of examples, other forums, pages, websites, Twitter accounts that are highlighting refugee voices, that are like amplifying refugee voices, are super critical in this context. And then also anything that we all do to highlight and, just point to success stories, either of refugees as individuals or programs designed to benefit or empower refugees. That's really important. That's important worldwide. It is a huge issue in the US in addition to Europe.
Yeah, everywhere, I guess, in the world right now. One last question to bounce back on the subject. Where would you like to, how would you like Facebook to help refugees to build the community and to help them within, like, let's say 5 years from now?
I hope that everyone is thinking about just community conceptually as a really important aspect of everything that we're doing and as a strategic asset in terms of any mobilization or awareness building or real-world outcome that you're pursuing. It's interesting, but thinking about community is often a bit of an intangible. It's something we kind of take for granted, and it's not always even though it's a social construct that's older than time, it really is sort of in the background, I think, in modern society. So when we're designing initiatives, think about who can be included in that, who's the community of designers and kind of inputs before you even start building or shipping things. But then also think about how a community of co-conspirators, of allies, of advocates, of influencers can help multiply the work that you're trying to do and really take things from a small scale, a small pilot or proof of concept, into a larger social change movement, because I think it's really critical for us all that we take action now to create the kind of future that we want. And so in terms of the refugee and humanitarian context, I would like to see more creative partnerships, uses of technology to make services more accessible, such as these partnerships between developers and Free Basics. And I hope that everyone here continues to do more to reiterate the positive messages around refugees and ensure that the tech and the tools and the solutions that we're building are appropriate and are inclusive and are available to refugees. And in turn, I really hope to see and hear many more refugee voices, many more refugee success stories from the individuals involved. And I'm really confident that tech and social media and Facebook will be part of that growing trend.
Okay, thank you very much. If you have any question to Vaughn, you can ask her on the side after this. So again, thank you. I think we can thank Vaughn for the...
Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, stay where you are.
Hi, Mike.
I've got one question before you
please.
leave. Now, there's been a kind of a news story blowing up in the news in the last couple of days about Facebook starting to reduce the organic ability for Facebook pages to be found, and apparently you're testing charging more and stuff like that for Facebook pages. Is that right? Because I'm conscious of is a lot of people out here running communities, and they want to be able to reach their community. And they've had, be working on likes and all those things.
Definitely.
Are sort of community efforts, we've got a Facebook page, TECHFUGEES. Are we going to be able to reach our audience that we've built more easily, or are you going to start charging us? Come on.
Okay.
Are you going to start charging us?
I would never charge, Mike. No.
Good.
A couple of thoughts. I totally empathize with people who are struggling to build that online presence, get the likes, get the distribution. I did online communication and marketing management for that NGO that I mentioned earlier. And it's hard, and these kind of incremental upvotes, et cetera, are sort of the key metric for a lot of those marketing and fundraising initiatives. So what I would say is, I do think what we see quite clearly is that the use of a Facebook page is great in terms of a kind of one-directional outgoing broadcast mechanism. And so you're likely to get reach and distribution there, but we don't see as much ongoing discussion and commenting and peer-to-peer or community member-to-member interaction on page content, which is one thing to just be aware of. And so that's one of the reasons why we're very bullish on groups as another space whereby you know that there's likely to be a recurring engagement. There's likely to be a lot of return visits, especially if what's happening in that group is meaningful. This is all about TECHFUGEES
we
group,
wouldn't
exactly.
really barely exist without our group.
And so I think that's a more robust way, another solution to consider in terms of how to get your message across to the right audience. So for larger organizations with a more multifaceted stakeholder ecosystem, I think it's really worth considering a set of groups, multiple groups, right? So you've got your fundraising targets in one, you've got your student volunteers in another, you've got your staff, your kind of core team in another. That's a great structure to consider.
So double down on groups, you think?
Clearly, I'm very bullish. But it also, going back to the pain I know that a lot of nonprofits and NGOs grapple with, being very under-resourced and stretched very thin, that ability to cut down on one-to-one communication, using a one-to-many model, one of your team members, having a content strategy that will reach lots of people and be more efficient is I think, very meaningful for small teams that are grappling with really big challenges and opportunities.
Great.
We're going to talk more
appreciate
about
that.
groups, Mike.
Thank you I apologize for jumping in there.
No, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you all
for
so
everything.
much. Thank you.
Thanks.